Hello and welcome. So welcome to the latest in our Workplace Wellbeing Ireland live webinar series in partnership with Irish Life Health and AJ Products. So yet again, a huge amount of registrations. So thank you to everyone that registered, and thanks also to everyone that's tuning in live. So we always try as much as possible to make the online experience as similar and interactive as our in-person events. So what can you do to take part? Well, I suppose for starters, you can answer all the poll questions. So you'll see some poll questions popping up in a few minutes. The chat functionality, we're great to see so many people using it already. That's in your taskbar below. So that's your networking opportunity. So yeah, use that right now to say hello, tell everyone where you're tuning in from. One piece of advice with this, though, make sure you click the option to, I think it says to send to panel plus all attendees. So just make sure you're not just sending that to the panel. I think that's happened a few times before. So make sure you're sending that to everyone can see it. Because that's your chance to network and to mingle and to comment on what's going on throughout the webinar. You'll also see in your taskbar there's the Q&A function down there. That's just a little different. That's where you can put questions directly to myself and to our panelists. So that nobody else will see that. It'll just be myself, Ellen and Rachel that can see that. And also, if you have any questions that you'd like to put to our partners, Irish Life Health or AJ Products, you can pop them in there in the Q&A function, and I'll make sure they get to the right people. So now, time permitting, I'll try to get to as many questions as possible on top of the questions that you've already sent me. So if you haven't already, now is a good time to get a cup of tea or a coffee or a glass of water. I'm going to kick off with a very brief introduction, and then we'll get straight into our discussion on the Mental Health Ally Programme at Accenture Ireland. Okay, let me just share my screen here. So you should be able to see my screen now, my presentation. If you can't, just holler there. Yeah, so very briefly, myself and the community. So my name is Brian. I'm the course director at the Postgraduate Certificate in Workplace Wellness at Trinity College in Dublin at Tangent. And delighted actually that one of our very recent graduates is on the panel today, so I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit later on. Also very recently launched the WorkWell Institute. We're very excited about that. This is like an online education hub, if you like, for education in this area. So the first program is up there and it's live, and I've got 20 pre-launch students going through that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on, but effectively it's the first program up there is developing a workplace wellbeing program that lasts. And the next program on the way is around wellbeing champion training. So I'll touch a little bit on that the very end of the webinar for anyone that wants to hang on for that. Also got a podcast, which I'm really enjoying getting out, recording and getting out there. It's just conversations with wellbeing leaders, with HR professionals, with anyone doing anything interesting in the area of well-being and promoting a healthy workplace. So you can check that out at workwellpodcast.com. And last but by no means least, so my social enterprise, Park Hit, and the big, hairy, audacious goal of which is to promote the importance of resistance exercise. So we're quite good at promoting cardiovascular exercise in Ireland, but then I think we kind of fall down a bit when it comes to promoting resistance exercise, and they're both equally as important. So Park Hit is the free weekly outdoor sessions in local parks, and are really, really simple, straightforward bodyweight exercises, and removing the financial barrier, and also removing, a lot of people think you may be lifting heavy weights in the gym is how you go about resistance exercise. So it's removing that barrier also. And really excited this week, or actually last week, to formally kick off the process to register Park Hit as a company limited by guarantee, and that clears the path then to apply for charity status. So that's all kicking off now, so applying for charity status in 2021 for Park Hit. The community, so this is why we're here today. So as you can see, previously it was a lot of in-person events. There's zero physical distancing in place. It was effectively, the whole idea is, I think a lot of wellbeing leaders or those that are looking to promote wellbeing in their workplace, they're quite often doing that on their own, perhaps in an organization, or maybe they're in a silo of a small team. So the community was effectively, a big room full of people bringing them all together, probably from different organizations, but kind of all, we're all pulling in the same direction, all promoting the same message. So we're sharing and we're learning from each other. And sure, we can't do that in person now, but it's the very same idea and the very same kind of spirit with the webinars. And there's a silver cloud to every lining. We've got 10 times as many people that are getting to see our webinars that would have been able to attend our in-person events. So, you know, great, there's benefits with everything. And I'm sure we'll get back to the in-person events very soon too. So that's why we're here, pretty much to share and to learn. Big shout out to our partners for the community partners. Irish Life Health came on board earlier this year, and they've been wonderful from day one. And I know they're doing incredible work at the moment to support their clients in what is a particularly challenging time. And actually, I was just recording a podcast on Friday with the HR leader from, I won't name the company, but just in case they don't win, but she was telling me that they're currently is at number 1 or number 2 on the Irish Life, the My Life, the STEP challenge, which is coming to an end very soon. So she's incredibly excited about that. So just one example of how Irish Life Health are supporting their clients at the moment with kind of promoting engagement as people work remotely, and also physical activity, so encouraging people to get out there and get active. And also it's the charity element as well. There's a large donation from Irish Life Health to the winner's charity of choice. So all good stuff. So thank you to Irish Life Health for your continued support. Big shout out as well to AJ Products. So AJ have been on board and supporting the community for the last couple of years now. And for anyone that doesn't know, AJ are Ireland's leading provider of active at work ergonomic solutions. And I think anyone who's been to any of our in-person events previously will be able to testify to the quality of the furniture and the ergonomic offering that AJ has, be it from the sit-stand desks to the desk bike, which is incredibly popular, and the ergonomic furniture then as well. And I'm actually in the process of moving very soon myself, so I'll certainly be reaching out to the team at AJ for some ergonomic solutions for the home office. So check out ajproducts.ie for more details there. Okay, so that's all from me. So I've got some poll questions here. So over to you guys listening in and looking in. Time to get off the sidelines and get involved. So here's a few poll questions to get us started. So you should be able to see them on your screen right now. And question number 1, I know if anyone watching the replay actually can't see the poll questions, so I'll just call them out. Question 1 is very straightforward, just pretty much to understand who's on the call. And we're just asking what best describes your role or your position. Is it from HR to wellbeing leader to service provider? Then questions 2 and 3 are more related to our topic this afternoon. Question 2 is, do you have a mental health program in your workplace? It's a simple yes or no. And question number 3, really interesting question, I think, is do you feel it's okay to say that you're not okay in your workplace? And that's regardless of whether or not you actually have a mental health program. So, and that's another yes or a no. We'll give everyone just a couple of minutes or a couple of moments just to finish off there. I can see already we have over 75% of people have voted already. So we're really motoring here. So people are being really interactive, which is great. And Mike, I'll wait till we get to 85, I think. We're at 81 at the moment, 81%. So just another moment or so. And I think once everyone's voted, then I can share the results with you. And I can see already, so what best describes your role? Looks like we're approaching 50% are in HR. We've got about 8% are senior leaders. Let me see, we're at 85% now. So I'm gonna end the polling. And let me see if I can share those results. That should be coming up on your screens now. So the vast majority would be in HR and in senior leadership positions. Great to see the wellbeing leader is growing in some Irish organizations. So we've got 12% represented there. Service providers and others. It looks like the majority of people would be internal focused within an organization, and 9% then are maybe external service providers and other. I'll have to double check on that. And now, do you have a mental health program? Oh, it's almost a 50-50 split there, yes and no. 53% yes, they do have a program in the workplace, and 47% no. But regardless of that, it's very interesting at question number 3. Do you feel it's okay to say that you're not okay in your workplace? And a large majority say yes, they do, 78%. So that's a really positive sign. So 4/5 pretty much saying that they do, and 22% saying that they don't. Okay, so it's certainly moving in the right direction. Good to see that. Okay, so brilliant. Thank you to everybody for sharing and for answering. I've got one more poll a little bit later on in the discussion. Okay, so and great to get that feedback in the poll. And I think it's clear. I ran a survey recently as well, where the feedback was that a lot of people in the community were genuinely interested in the area of mental health, but not just the area. They were also interested in, well, what does a mental health program in a workplace actually look like? Do you have an example, a case study example? And I had come across the mental health ally program at Accenture Ireland before. So I reached out to Rachel and to Ellen, and thanks so much to Rachel and to Ellen for offering up their time to discuss it there today. So pretty much today, I think Rachel and Ellen are going to give us an introduction to the program, to tell us where it came from. I think you're going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes, Rachel and Ellen, just discussing that. And then, so I'll go on mute for a while, and then I'll come back in and we might have a few questions. So if anyone in the audience does have any questions, pop them in the Q&A, and I'll come back in about 15 minutes time, and we can chat with Rachel and Ellen then. Over to you guys, and thanks again for joining us today.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Brian. So I suppose I'll just start by introducing myself and Ellen. So my name is Rachel. I am a researcher in the Human Insights Lab, which is a team that works in the DOC, Accenture's Global Centre for Innovation. So my day-to-day role, I look at the intersection between people and society and business and technology. So part of that also includes things like employee experience and mental health. But apart from my day-to-day role, I'm also very involved in our mental health ally program at Accenture. So when I first joined Accenture, prior to Accenture, my background is in psychology, and that's where my interest in mental health came from. So I did a BA and a master's in psychological science in UCD, and then I did a PhD in technology and youth mental health. And then when I joined Accenture, I initially joined their health and public service practice. But one of the things that is really great about Accenture is that there are so many extracurriculars going on and so many opportunities to get involved in different things outside your day-to-day role. So I was particularly interested in mental health and well-being. So I went to seek out what are Accenture doing in this space. And my timing was very fortuitous because at that time, Alicia Bobbin, who I see is on the call as well, was looking at how we could bring a mental health ally program to Accenture Ireland. And I've been involved in the program ever since. So I'll hand over to Ellen to introduce herself as well, and then we'll talk a little bit about the background and context of the program and what it means in practice.
Perfect. Thanks a million, Rachel. So I work in Accenture's strategy practice inside our talent and organisation practice. And essentially what we do is we work with usually large but sometimes small organizations to kind of drive organizational change and organizational transformation. And the kind of work that I specifically do usually looks at the people within that organization. So in summary, we kind of work with organizations to help them get the best out of their people and work with people to help them get the best out of their organizations. So my role is client facing. I work in a variety of different projects with different clients. So while Rachel would kind of work more internally with some of our clients there, I'd look at applying some of the lessons and the recommendations that she has to our client work. And before I joined Accenture then, I similarly, Rachel and I studied together. I had a background in psychology. So I did an undergraduate and a master's in UCD in psychology. And then I went on and did a PhD at the University of Manchester. And my research always looked at kind of the concept of online peer support. And this is essentially what we're going to talk to you about today, that idea of peer support, that idea of getting help and support from the people around you, your friends, your colleagues, whoever they happen to be. So that was something that I was really interested in. And again, similar to Rachel, when I joined Accenture, the kind of concept of the mental health ally program was something that I knew there was a huge amount of empirical evidence behind, and I was really excited to kind of get involved in that. So we're going to give you a bit of an overview of what exactly the program is, and I suppose, you know, our real passion, though we both have roles that don't directly sit within mental health, one of our real passions is kind of this idea of workplace wellness. I should also give a particular plug, as Brian mentioned, I just finished the Workplace Wellness Programme with Trinity, with Tangent, which was a really enjoyable experience. But I suppose what we would love would be to be able to share our experiences and potentially lessons learned, successes, and kind of help to support organisations to drive forward similar initiatives. Perfect. I'll pass back to you, Rachel, if you want to kick off the overview.
Perfect. Thanks, Ellen. So part of our core values at Accenture is really about putting people first, and we have a huge focus on inclusion and diversity. And part of this is really about creating an environment where everyone feels they can bring their whole self to work. And the mental health program is an initiative that's really in line with this. So our goal is that every single member of Accenture should feel that they can talk confidently and confidentially to a colleague, to a line manager, or to a HR representative about a problem they're experiencing, and feel confident that they can get the support they need. And the Mental Health Ally programme was set up to help support this. So it was initially set up by a managing director in the UK about 5 or 6 years ago now. And then, as I mentioned, when I joined Accenture, it was about 4 years ago, they were looking at how we could bring this programme to the Ireland office. So I got in touch with Alicia, who was looking at having conversations with the UK around their training, around their programme and how they managed it. And what we did was we spent some time adapting that training to an Irish context. We had conversations with leadership, and we got a little bit of budget to be able to provide training to employees around mental health. And at the very end of 2017, start of 2018, we launched the programme within Accenture Ireland. And since that time, we've trained over 500 employees as mental health allies within Ireland. And since the success of that programme has gone so well, it's been implemented in over 20 countries across Accenture globally, and we now have over 4,500 trained mental health allies across Accenture globally. So that's been a really great success. That was really pioneered by the UK and Ireland, and something that we're very proud of. This is something that we do in Accenture because, you know, we believe in putting people first, and we have so many employees who are passionate about this. But I think it's really important in the early days, when we were having conversations around this and getting leadership buy-in, it's not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do, that there's a really strong business case around investing in people and investing in mental health in the workplace. And Accenture Research published a piece of work in 2018 where they surveyed employees all across the UK, and they published this research as part of the This Can Happen conference, which got a lot of media attention at the time because it was where Prince Harry and Prince William spoke about their experiences around mental health. But this piece of research found that over 90% of workers in the UK had been directly touched by mental health challenges, with 66% of these reporting that they themselves had personally experienced them. And what's interesting about these figures is we often talk about this idea of 1 in 4. So that 1 in 4 of us will experience a diagnosable mental health disorder within our lifetime. But what this shows is that while 1 in 4 of us may experience, you know, a critical mental health disorder, mental health affects everyone. It touches everyone. And that means it's part of everyone's experience and needs to be addressed. And interestingly, among those in the survey who had reported facing a mental health challenge personally, the majority of them, so over 60% of them, said they hadn't spoken to anyone in work about this. And this was only in 2018, so this was quite recent. And something that we've seen as well, in the last decade, there's been huge advances in the discourse around mental health. It's something that we're all a lot more open to talking about in society and in business, but there still is a long way to go. And another piece of Accenture research that was published the same year in 2018 found that just 14% of people they spoke to had heard senior leaders in their organizations talking about the importance of mental health. So it's still something that, you know, we're really fighting to get on leadership agenda across the board. And it's interesting because the business case is quite clearly there. There was a piece of research done by CAPD in 2018, which found that poor mental health was the most common cause of long-term absence in the UK. There has been also a lot of research done on not just absenteeism, but presenteeism. So the idea that people who are experiencing mental ill health coming to work and not getting the proper supports, and the annual cost to employers of mental health presenteeism is estimated to be between 17 and 26 billion annually. So it's a huge business cost to not investing in this. We also know from a piece of research done by Mind, which are a UK mental health charity, that 1 in 10 employees rate their current mental health as poor or very poor, and 40% of these have taken time off as a result. But the converse is also true. When we see organisations putting investment into wellness and into mental health for their employees, they have better levels of employee satisfaction, they have higher productivity, better company profiles, and unsurprisingly, they've reduced sickness absence, they've lower staff turnover, but most importantly, it created an environment where employees want to work and in which they perform well. So it's not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do is kind of the message that we would give to anyone who wants to kind of set this program up or communicate the benefits of this with their leadership. And I'm going to now pass over to Ellen, who's going to talk a little bit about what the Mental Health Ally program looks like in practice within Accenture.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Rachel. So the Mental Health Ally program it's a group of trained ambassadors, and I suppose kind of the key word to emphasize there is training, that this is not a program where people put their hands up and they're automatically enrolled. There is a certain amount of kind of commitment that goes along with it. So they're a group of kind of ambassadors or advocates or go-to resources who kind of put their hand up and say, you know, look, I'm available to have conversations if someone is seeking support or information, either for themselves or potentially for a colleague who's experiencing mental health challenges. And like I mentioned up front, kind of this concept of peer support, this concept of seeking support from someone who's at the same level from you, essentially that's distinct from the support that you might receive, say, from your GP or from a therapist or from your line manager. It's essentially just being part of a socially supportive network, kind of an informal network of people. And that probably sounds like quite a small thing. A lot of people are already part of a socially supportive network, but the research shows that the impact of it is incredibly powerful. Getting support and help from the people around you, having people that you can ask questions, having people that you can call on when you need to, it has an incredibly positive impact on your psychological health, also your physical health, and even your life expectancy. And what I find is incredible about this is that actually works both ways. So people who access support have a longer life, but people who give support also tend to have an increased life expectancy. So when we talk about a mental health ally, we're very careful about kind of the language that we use around it. And I suppose in terms of kind of lessons for success, one of it is really, like any kind of implementation, any kind of initiative, is managing the communications around it. So a mental health ally is someone who's an active listener. They're someone who acts as a signpost to resources, supports, and they can listen, they can empathize, they can point towards other people who can help, but they're absolutely not a problem solver. They're not a psychologist, they're not a mental health professional. It's not their job to diagnose, it's not their job to judge, it's not their job to kind of guess the condition that someone might have. It's really just to provide kind of a listening ear for that. So what the training involves is it's a day-long training session, which previously was obviously held in person. It's now being done virtually, and I believe that's going to be condensed down to a half-a-day session. One of the requirements that we have is that people do a certain amount of pre-learning or pre-reading around it. So they do a little bit, it's maybe an hour long of an online training course where they're introduced to some of the basic concepts so that people aren't turning up into the room totally cold. And a lot of work went into the training to make sure that it was relatively kind of experiential and interactive. So it's led by a facilitator, it's led by a trainer who kind of walks the participants through the training material, but there is an awful lot of small group work done as part of it. And that's been one of the challenges, I suppose, with transitioning it to online, is managing that small group component. But the idea is that people who are taking part in the room, they're learning both from the person who's delivering the training, the facilitator, but also from the people around them, and they're kind of building up that peer network. Crucially for us, I think we have a mix of levels in the room. So you can tend to have people who are quite junior up to quite senior leadership in the room, depending on who has signed up in the day. And that can definitely be intimidating for some people, but I think there is something lovely about having that broader mix of opinions and perspectives in the room, which is really nice. And like I said, really the key aim is to kind of upskill people around active listening and around empathetic listening. It's not training people to say, you know, if this happens, then you should definitely do this, but it's more about giving them the skills and resources to kind of manage a difficult conversation. So in terms of what the training consists of then, like I said, it's a day-long session, and we open with a little bit around that kind of broader context and the strategy. So just like Rachel has kind of spoken to you about, and really the aim is to ensure that everyone in Accenture feels that they can talk confidentially to someone and they can access the support that they need. So we then talk a little bit around kind of mental health stigma and awareness. So again, touching on some of the facts and figures that Rachel would have spoken about there, and really just trying to articulate, you know, that this is a challenge in the workplace. So really interesting, I think, to see that stat you had up front, Brian, from the group here, around 78% of people feeling they can speak about mental health issues at work. I suppose that wouldn't really be the broader experience out there. So fantastic to see that so many organisations represented here are really ahead of the curve. But we would talk a little bit about the, you know, the impact that stigma has and the impact that it has when someone feels they can't share their story and someone feels they can't be open in the workplace. We then go on to talk about what the role of the mental health ally is, and I suppose one of the key successes from the training is that it's walked through step by step, and people have the chance to kind of challenge the facilitator, I suppose, and really articulate their own misconceptions and have them kind of ironed out. So a lot of people do sign up to the training thinking that, you know, they want to be the one who gives advice. And really the role of the mental health ally isn't necessarily about advice. It's not necessarily about direction. Signposting rather than direction is probably the easiest way to think about it. So we talk about what the role is, we talk about what the role isn't, and then a big component of the training is on active listening and role plays. And role plays are, everyone hates doing them, but they are incredibly effective. And one of the things that we really encourage allies afterwards is, you know, just keep doing it, keep going with the role plays. You know, if you know that you have people who are on your team who are mental health allies, you know, maybe meet them for a coffee and do a little bit of practicing, because some of the language that you use when you're actively listening, because it is in a way kind of a one-sided conversation, you're listening a lot more than you're talking. That can really be very different to how we interact in the workplace. So it can take a little bit of practice to do that. So really have a huge emphasis on the role plays, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people. And then we finish up by having a section around self-care. And I think that is really important, particularly for kind of the cohort of people who we have who sign up to be mental health allies. You know, typically they are very empathetic, they're very interested in helping people, they're interested in offering support. And I suppose one of the things that we're conscious of is that that support doesn't come at a burden to themselves. So we talk about the importance of kind of, you know, putting on your own life belt first, you know, accessing support when you need it, not taking on too much, not kind of overburdening yourself as part of it. And a key part of that then is, you know, it's not just that you do your training, you get your, if we were in the office, you'd have a lanyard, you know, you have this kind of information pack that comes with it. A lot of people will have email signatures and things to identify that the fact that they're mental health allies, but it's not a case you do the training and everything's finished, particularly because of that self-care part. I think it's a really important ongoing conversation to have. So once people have been trained as mental health allies, the way we kind of frame it is that they're part of the mental health ally network, essentially. And we try, and Rachel is really the person who leads up on this, try and do a lot of work with that network to make sure that they're engaged, that they're supported. So some of the things around that would be kind of driving out key communications, driving out key campaigns, linking to particular resources. I think we've definitely seen that over the last 6 months in the time of COVID. You know, there's been a lot of really great guides that have been out there around mental health. So kind of sharing that information, sharing resources that are there, and really trying to identify what's best practice and bring that to people. We do a monthly kind of champion call where people who are across particular accounts or representing particular components in the business will identify themselves as champions. So these are people who will just be a little bit more active in our network than some of the allies. So we have on a monthly basis check-in, people share stories, share successes, maybe talk about smaller, more informal events that they've run on their particular accounts or in their particular clients. And we try and do quarterly events as well, where we'll focus on a particular topic and we'll spotlight something. Another thing that we have done in the last while is run a survey. And I think, you know, with any of this, I can see a question coming in around advice on selling this kind of idea. You know, I think data is really king in these situations. And I think the data that we've got from our mental health ally program really speaks to, I suppose, not just how helpful people find it, but also, to be honest, how enjoyable people find being a mental health ally, being part of that network. You know, I'd say for many people, in fact, you know, finding themselves part of that network and finding themselves part of a like-minded community is something that's nearly more important to them than the help and support that they offer to other people. That's something that they find really enjoyable. Is there anything I've missed out there on the kind of ongoing support, Rachel, or that broader network piece?
No, and I think that's a really good point. And I suppose this would have been a lesson learned for us early on. So when we initially launched the program, our main focus was on training, you know, getting the training right, getting people trained. And it became very apparent to us after a period of about 6 months was that's not enough just to train people and then say, right, that's it, you're done. And that's where the concept of this kind of ongoing network support really came out of. So I think you've touched on kind of the key things we do. It's really about creating engagement and a sense of connection among the networks. It's about connecting the mental health allies with each other so they can talk about their experiences of providing support for others and challenges that they might have had. And I think one of the biggest challenges we've had in the past 6 months since moving to working from home is how do we manage the engagement with this network? Things have shifted. So what we did was we set up a Microsoft Teams page, which is our internal social media kind of channel. And we use that to help the mental health allies to interact with each other more formally. So the big thing I think we've lost from kind of the move to working from home is those kind of serendipitous conversations that allies might have with each other on client site, you know, when they're going for a coffee or in the office and they're going to the water cooler. And they're a lot harder to get because they're not scheduled conversations. They're conversations that just arise spontaneously. So what we did was we set up this Microsoft Teams page and we set out an engagement plan. Where the members of our core mental health ally team and our mental health champions would all post on that page each week and about different topics. And we'd run things like competitions. So we ran a really successful competition around podcasts that people found helpful. And it was just a way of getting the other allies to start interacting with each other. And after a couple of weeks, what we started to see was the allies themselves were spontaneously posting on this page and having those side conversations, which is exactly what we wanted. We wanted to create another format for which people could engage with each other. We host, as Ellen said, quarterly events. So again, that used to be an opportunity to bring people together. We've had to move them to online more recently. But in terms of what's worked really well there, sometimes we've got in speakers. We had a really great speaker from Drink Aware last December who came in to talk about alcohol and mental health and did a workshop around that. And that was really, really successful. And what people liked about it a lot was it was not preachy. It was not about telling people that alcohol was bad. It was just about raising people's awareness of the link between alcohol and mental health and giving people strategies to manage that and to, you know, manage their alcohol consumption and to have conversations around it that can sometimes be uncomfortable. So that was really positive. But to be honest, our most successful events are ones where we've had panelists in. So we held an event where we got our mental health allies, 4 of them, to speak and have a facilitated discussion about their different experiences of providing support. And people got a huge amount of value from that because it's just hearing someone else's personal experience. And we also had an event which we hosted virtually in August where we brought in people who promoted positive mental health across different industries. So again, not professional mental health workers, but just people who had an interest in this and had experience in trying to promote that in their workplace. And again, that was really successful. So those kind of events our allies found really useful. I suppose our other big challenge since moving to working from home has really been around visibility. So as Ellen mentioned, when we used to train people on site, everyone who was a trained mental health ally had a special green lanyard. So you could just see them in the office and you'd know, oh, that person's a mental health ally. That's someone I could approach for a chat. And then we've lost that because at home, you know, people aren't wearing their lanyards. So to kind of overcome that, we've done different strategies, like on our profile pictures, which appear on our emails or on our Teams pages, we've put little symbols identifying ourselves as mental health allies. So someone, if they get an email from you, they can see, oh, that person is a mental health ally. Or another really nice thing that one of our mental health ally champions did was within her team, she got everyone who was a mental health ally to write a letter on a piece of paper and take a picture of themselves with it. And when she put it all together, it spelled out proud to be a mental health ally. And then she was able to send that graphic around to everyone in the team so people could just look at this and say, oh, I didn't know Ellen was a mental health ally. I know now I can reach out to her for support. So again, it's just coming up with creative ways to create that visibility around the network. Yeah, and I think that kind of, unless Ellen, you want to add?
I think what I was going to say is kind of counterintuitively, while COVID has and moved to working from home has made things a lot more difficult, I think in some ways there's elements that it's made easier in that I think the broader conversation around mental health has really shifted. You know, I think you're probably seeing, I've definitely seen that with my friends, with my family, you know, the way we talk about mental health, and even just literally the amount of times we use the word mental health and kind of well-being in a daily conversation has increased drastically. And I suppose there's been a real recognition at an organizational level of the importance of well-being. I think that's really been elevated. So while it's been challenging in some ways, I think that we have seen definitely within Accenture that there's been more importance placed on it. So when we moved to working from home, Accenture launched kind of a Let's Get Virtual campaign was how it was branded. And that was kind of like a broad push to look after overall well-being. And the impact of that, I suppose, was it really created these kind of more open and honest conversations. So some of the things that were going on were things like online yoga classes or, you know, sessions around parenting in a pandemic and teaching from home and resilience and things like that. But what we felt as the Mental Health Ally program was that we were really up in that conversation, you know, any conversation around working from home, you know, and the challenges that we're experiencing prior to COVID. The Mental Health Ally program was really there as part of it. So it's challenges, absolutely, but I think that increased spotlight is ultimately something that's really positive that's coming out of this.
Well, thank you, Ellen and Rachel. Now I managed to hide myself. Let's see if I can show myself again. Am I back in the room?
We can see you.
Fantastic. Okay, so well, that was an excellent overview of the Mental Health Ally program. So thanks so much for that. So, I mean, so much in that, you know, it's the smart thing to do as opposed to just the right thing to do. I love that idea of the mix of people and levels that you have in the Ally program. It's open to everybody. And I think that mix of levels and diversity can really help. Reminded me of something that Suicide or Survive say when they're hosting their workshops. They try not to have just one, you know, just the senior leadership team or just a certain level. It's that mix of levels leads to different conversations. And yes, it can be intimidating in the beginning, but it can lead to greater conversations and people opening up that bit more. The signposting rather than directing, you know, really interesting stuff there. There's lots of questions coming in. I'd say the majority of them are related to the training, so I might just touch on that. And quite a few of them now came in, Ellen, before you went into detail on the training. I think you've covered quite a bit of it, but I may take a step back. David was asking, could you compare the Ally training to mental health first aid was his question. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think maybe perhaps Olivia or Alicia, some of the original leaders actually went on mental health first aid training in the very beginning.
Yeah, and interestingly, because I saw a question coming in as well around could we recommend a training provider. So our initial training was developed in the UK in partnership with Mind, who are a mental health charity over there, just to ensure, you know, that proper level of QA in terms of mental health content. And then we adapted it here, and it is delivered by an external training provider. But it's all managed kind of in-house, I suppose. But what we have recommended when we've had conversations around setting up peer support programs with other organisations is to use mental health first aid. So our mental health Ally training would be, I suppose, a much lighter version of that. We talk about depression and stress and anxiety as kind of, I suppose, the more common mental health disorders that you might see manifesting in the workplace. And we talk about peer support and empathic listening, whereas mental health first aid is kind of more focused, and they would go much more in depth on different types of mental health disorders. They would go into substance abuse and psychosis and things that we just wouldn't touch on because there just isn't scope to cover everything in a 1 day or a half day training. But I would highly recommend mental health first aid if it's something that you're looking to implement within your organization. We have tried to, where possible, get our mental health allies who are looking for further development onto mental health first aid training courses. A number of us have done it, so myself and Alicia have done it, and it's absolutely fantastic. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, and I think there's always, because I can see other people asking then about kind of in-house training team. One of the challenges, I suppose, and there is no real right answer to this, I think it's very much a case of looking at your organization, looking at what's going to be right for you. There's something incredibly powerful about having senior leadership playing some element of a role in mental health first aid, or sorry, any kind of mental health ally program. I think, so what you do need is that organizational support for it, and that was definitely, like Rachel said, one of the lessons learned. Having the training is great, having the program is great, but one thing we've really worked on over the last kind of 2 years is the what comes next piece. And I think having senior leadership buy-in, having senior leadership visibility, and equally having those very strong links to HR are something that's really important. So whether you're doing it internally or externally, I think it's a case of looking at what you need, looking at what's going to meet your needs, and trying to tailor it based on that.
Excellent. And a few people still asking, it's Mental Health First Aid Ireland, and Donal Scanlon is the of this parish. She's been on a webinar and podcast previously who would provide that training. So Mental Health First Aid Ireland, an excellent first port of call, maybe perhaps if you're looking to get something set up yourselves. And yeah, that leadership input is so important, isn't it? And Rachel, you had a great quote there. Fighting to get it on the leadership agenda was what you said. And again, a few of the questions are relating to kind of statistics and metrics. What kind of metrics are you using? I imagine you're using a combination of, you quoted some kind of evidence initially, and then you mentioned you're conducting your own internal surveys then as well. So is it the combination of those two then that you're putting in front of leadership, and to say, look, here's our statistics, here's our data, this is what's working, this is what's not?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, Brian, because we talk about this in relation to not just well-being, but like people and culture in general, and how do we convince leadership of the power of people and culture, and focusing on that. And the organizational psychologist Adam Grant spoke about this recently. We interviewed him for a project, and he spent his whole career doing this, convincing leaders of the value of people. And he says, fundamentally what works is hard data combined with human stories. So it's about selling the evidence base behind this in combination with the real power that it's had for someone in their day-to-day experience. And for me, kind of, this program has been so successful, and we've been fortunate to have won an internal global award for the work we've done on this in the UK and Ireland. But for me, honestly, my proudest moment has been, on a call last week when someone told me how much of a difference this had made to them personally and professionally, and how much value they'd got out of doing the mental health ally training and creating that network of support around them. I think that's the real value of doing this, and it's bringing those kind of human stories in combination with, the real business case for it to leaders that really gets that buy-in.
Yeah, and I think, there's kind of things on an anecdotal level that, all right, they're anecdotes, but again are very powerful. So I'm quite involved in our graduate recruitment program, and one of the things, I suppose, we do see a little bit of a generational gap in terms of mental health and how we think and talk about mental health. And I think that's no surprise if you look at the recent statistics around COVID and the impact. We're seeing so much more of an impact in terms of youth well-being and loneliness, really, in terms of the pandemic, that often kind of our graduates, or the more junior members of staff, are people who, you don't have to put a business case to them. It's just incredibly clear to them that this is something that we should be investing in. So anecdotally, when I'm at recruitment fairs and I'm talking to potential candidates, we can talk about our graduate offering, we can talk about our healthcare benefits, we can talk about our this, that, and the other. But when we talk about the mental health ally program, not everyone, but a significant proportion of graduates, like, their ears really do prick up. And I think from the perspective of kind of attracting the top talent and absolutely retaining the top talent, having a focus on mental health is something that's really important for, our Gen Zs and our millennials, that kind of incoming purpose generation. Another metric, which again is a small one, but consistently when mental health ally training is offered, like, it's booked out in a matter of hours. There's a huge appetite, there's a huge demand here for this among our people. So, and I think you know, again, the conversation with COVID has probably shifted slightly from return on investment to, you know, the employee engagement, the employee well-being side of things. So our business case is nearly, this is what our people want, this is what our people need, more so than this is what the business needs.
Excellent. And yeah, like some great quotes there, some interesting metrics. Of course, if you have demand, if the courses are pretty much booking out in advance, that's a clear sign that people are really genuinely interested in this. And I'm not surprised to hear that the graduates are really interested in, that their ears prick up, that something like that is involved, that they're more interested in working with an organization like Accenture. And what a great quote there, hard data plus human stories. It's not one or the other, is it? It's that combination. And Adam Grant is incredible. Yeah. So was he one of those speakers you had, you interviewed for the Mental Health Ally program, or was that something separate?
No, we engaged him as part of a separate project in our innovation centre. But again, it was exploring that piece around, you know, putting people at the centre, which is so connected with mental health allies.
Fantastic. And we speak about that. We spoke about that, Ellen, as well, in step one and the workplace, the PG cert in workplace wellness. It's that human stories, sharing those personal stories with leadership, but also backing it up with the evidence, with the research evidence, plus what kind of information have you got yourself? What meaningful data can you gather yourself internally? So great stuff there. And so you kind of touched on the engagements then quite a bit. I imagine that was a real, as it has been for many organizations, the change from in-person working to remote working. What's the plan for the future then? Will you continue online with the training, do you think? Will you continue with the quarterly sessions online? Sounds like you're getting good engagement still, even though you are working remotely.
Yeah, so I think sorry, Rachel, you just jump in whenever, but the way we operate in Accenture, we have kind of 3 head offices in Dublin, but typically because we work with clients, usually our people are spread across different kind of client sites. So even though we try and do a lot of things in person, and we know there's a real you know, it's lovely to do things in person. It's lovely to have that face-to-face engagement. Kind of by default, our way of working nearly is virtually. So I suppose just from that purely logistical perspective, it wasn't a huge, as much of maybe a transition to us as it would be for organizations where people are used to working side by side. So there's definitely elements of that, I think, that will be kept up. Even, you know, logistically, I think that if you do a cost benefit analysis, I think the benefits of having this program, albeit virtually, is something that, you know, we're going to want to keep. We're going to want to be doing the training more than we're going to want to be recreating that in-person experience.
Excellent. And some great questions coming in related to let's say the allies, for example. How do you have any criteria when you're selecting an ally, someone to go forward for the training? Or if I was let's say I'm a graduate or a new hire, how would I go about applying to be a mental health ally?
So we have no criteria in that it's open to everyone, because we want everyone to feel they can be a part of this. And it's interesting, it's a conversation we had very early on in the program. Do we make this for just managers and above? And, you know, we decided that no, this is something that should be open to everyone. And what we do try to ensure is that we've good representation across all our different business areas. So like Ellen said, we work across a lot of different sites and in a lot of different functions. So there have been times in the past where we noticed that we have, you know, very little to no mental health ally representation in a specific business area. So we might host a specific training for people looking to become mental health allies from that business area. To get that balance. But I suppose one of our biggest challenges, and just in terms of time, is, you know, getting more senior leaders involved and trained as mental health allies. And again, that's primarily a time-based thing. It's just, you know, with a lot of client and business demands, it's hard to find, you know, a full day of time to give to this training. But now that we're moving to a half-day virtual training, it's much more accessible. So it's something that is a big focus for us this year.
And question that's kind of related then is, if I can get it here, is there, you mentioned the different business areas, so you do aim to have a bit of a spread there. Is there a kind of a target kind of number of allies per employee? Do you have something like that in mind? Is there a ratio you're looking for? Is that something you're aiming for?
In an ideal world, everyone would be an ally. And I think, you know, maybe that goes back to the business case a little bit. The mental health ally training is fantastic, but it's not rocket science. You know, it is fundamentally having an open and honest conversation. It's fundamentally around empathetic listening. And I think whether you are a colleague, whether you're a line manager, whether you're a managing director, those are skills that are incredibly critical to have, both in the workplace and in your day-to-day life. So you know, we often talk about kind of the future of work and the importance of digital skills, and also the importance of kind of those soft skills, particularly when we think about, you know, automation and robotics and those kind of trends that will come into the workplace. That soft skills will really be what will kind of keep us in our roles. So I think what we see as being part of the Mental Health Ally programme, it's actually such a fundamental skill for everyone that we would like everyone to do it.
Excellent. An ideal goal to have, absolutely. Yeah. And how do you manage it then? Is there almost like a steering committee that would sit above the allies to kind of manage the upcoming training and the ongoing, you know, the engagement piece, Rachel, that you touched on?
Yes, so we have a core mental health ally team, and the majority of them do this as a side of desk activity. It's because it's something we're all really passionate about. So Ellen, for the last year, has kind of led out in our continuous learning and education pillar. So looking in, you know, how can we provide the best resources and, you know, link our allies with, you know, upcoming webcasts and things like that. Then I would lead out on our network pillar, so kind of managing that engagement piece, our quarterly events. We have a communications lead as well, who kind of looks at how we can promote this program within our wider business. So for anyone who doesn't know about the Mental Health Ally program, how can we inform them about this training and how to get on it? And then we have our operations lead who helps us manage the training. And kind of as a core team, I suppose, yeah, you could call us nearly a steering group. We link in with our wellbeing lead. So we have a full-time wellbeing lead for Accenture Ireland, Roisin, who I think is also on the call here. And we work closely with her to help manage the program on a day-to-day basis.
And I should say we also have a sponsor. We have a leadership sponsor who's a managing director in Accenture. And again, you know, when we talk about getting it on the leadership agenda, I think it's really, really important that we have that. We can't be in every conversation. We won't be in every conversation, but it is really important to have someone at a senior level who is endorsing this, supporting this, and has kind of formally put their name behind the Mental Health Ally program. And, you know, every kind of well-being initiative, I suppose, really needs that muscle behind it.
Yeah, and I can't endorse what Ellen has said enough. I think, you know, critical to getting anything like this off the ground, getting budget, to getting this, you know, to be taken seriously at leadership level, is having a good leadership sponsor.
Excellent. Yeah, so that's a very clear kind of structure you've painted there. Yeah, thank you. With the leadership sponsor there in place as well. So thank you for sharing that. And you kind of touched on it there, maybe just outside of the well-being or the mental health ally, you do, as you mentioned, you have a full, Accenture Ireland has a full-time well-being role. I think there's also, you've got some well-being coordinators that work at some of your client sites. Can you tell us, maybe for the guys listening in, what's involved in those roles?
We have a people crew across Accenture. So basically we have a number of representatives for each of the different business areas whose focus, and mental health will be a part of it, but it's a wider focus around, you know, looking after our people and engagement. So they'll do things like look after new joiners, look at social events, or, you know, virtual social events in the current world that we're living in right now. And then things like mental health and wellness initiatives, and a small portion of their time is dedicated to this specific role in addition to their day-to-day work. So kind of that's how we manage it. And particularly, as Ellen said, in such a dispersed business. So even when we were working in the office, we were very dispersed. So that's one of the big challenges, is how do you maintain that sense of connection and ensure those initiatives and communications are being disseminated across the business. And we do that through that people crew network.
Yeah, and I think it's always a challenge, I think, particularly in an organisation as large as ours, between having things done centrally in a standardized way, but also really meeting the relative diverse needs of people. So one of the things that we try and push out through the Mental Health Ally Network, and as well through additional structures like the people crew, is, you know, to empower people and give them the autonomy that if they have a good idea, that they can run with it, you know. So if they find that there's, you know, a particular practice where something is a specific challenge, or there's a particular interest in something, that they can go ahead and do that. So, you know, they don't need to wait for, say, a company-wide directive to say that you know, everyone should block out their diaries between 1 and 2 to have their lunch, that actually, you know, as a mental health ally, you should feel empowered to potentially have that conversation with your line manager and suggest doing something like that, and really kind of drive forward the practices that you want to see.
Excellent. Yeah, and there's still some questions rolling in. I'm conscious of the fact we're a few minutes to the hour. Maybe any final thoughts before we finish up? And a few of the questions are related to maybe sharing some of the metrics or some of the research that you mentioned, Rachel. You might send me on some of those details afterwards, the CIPD research, for example, and I will include those along with the replay so we can share any of those. But any final thoughts then before we finish up? And maybe you could let people know where they could reach out to you to find out more.
Yeah, I suppose the kind of key learnings for me would be a really Ellen's piece around the leadership sponsorship. I think that's critical to getting this off the ground. In terms of, I know a lot of questions we had about, you know, selling this to leadership. It's that combination of, you know, real human experience that connects with them empathically, plus the hard data that shows this makes business sense. And just, you know, if you're enthusiastic and passionate about this, push and doors will open. And Alicia was such a strong advocate for this for about a year before we got the program launched in Accenture Ireland, because she kept putting up her hand and saying, this is important, how do we do this? So yeah, I'd really encourage people to, you know, take that passion and drive this within your organization.
I'm glad you went first there, Rachel, because I couldn't think of what my closing words are going to be. I think mine is really just that, you know, this is a core skill. This is a fundamental skill, what we're talking about here. So if people are working in any kind of capacity where they're working with other people, or specifically if they're line managing, they need to be able to have these conversations, particularly in the digital world. So I would say, you know, you're upskilling your people with something that's going to support them. You're upskilling them with something that's going to support them and your business in the future of work. So as time goes on, as things inevitably, I would say, transition digitally and stay digitally, these are the kind of skills that you need. So there's a key kind of talent strategy as well as employee retention piece behind it. And that's kind of the drum that I would be banging if you're trying to steer a conversation with senior leadership.
Great point. So yeah, as to summarize, and it's absolutely a smart thing to do and not just the right thing to do. Brilliant. Thanks so much. And thanks for mentioning Alicia there as well. Alicia spoke at one of my events last year in Facebook, and that's where I kind of first was introduced to the program. And I know she kind of incredibly passionate about the program and getting it off the ground in the first place. So shout out to Alicia there for that as well. So thank you for mentioning Alicia. I've just got a couple of thank yous before we wrap up. And a few closing points, so I might just share again my screen. And given the subject we're talking about, I just did want to mention it. It's a Green Ribbon campaign. It's the Sea Change Ireland launched the Green Ribbon month back in the 1st of October, and today they were launching in Cork. But it's for the entire month of October. You can grab a green ribbon. They're completely free. Grab one in an AIB branch, in a Boots branch, and I think it's in an Air retail outlet as well. And you can wear your green ribbon. And just kind of help have a conversation with someone and end the stigma around mental health. And if I'm not mistaken, guys, as well, Alicia mentioned that I think Accenture's colour is normally, the lanyards are normally purple, but the mental health champions wear green lanyards as a result of your work with Barbara Brennan and the team at Sea Change back quite a few years ago. So green ribbon, green lanyards for mental health. Workwell Institute I mentioned, you can go to workwellinstitute.org to find out more. Drop me a line if you're interested in that Developing a Workplace Wellbeing Program That Lasts course. It's an 8-step framework, and step 1 on that framework is pretty much what we've spoken quite a bit about today. It's that importance of committed leadership and, you know, bringing leadership on board, hitting them with the good quality information, data and metrics, and sharing those people stories as well. So if you're interested in learning more, go to that site or drop me an email. Go to the podcast for any further conversations in this area. There's a great mix of different conversations. We're halfway through season 2 on the podcast. It's workwellpodcast.com. And just a big thank you. Now, my thank you list, I often forget people. So first of all, big shout out to Rachel and to Ellen for giving up your time today. That was an excellent overview of the Mental Health Ally program. It's genuinely hard to get kind of a view inside an organization. I mean, the theory is really, you know, it's really good, really incredibly useful, but to get a practical example of how it actually works within an organization is incredibly powerful. So thanks so much for sharing so much with us today. Really appreciate it. Big shout out to our partners again, Irish Life Health and AJ Products. Thanks so much for all your support. Thanks to Quiva, thanks to Annalise for all their help in supporting getting this webinar up and running. And thank you also to everybody watching in, everybody watching live, everybody that registered. Your support really helps the community. So thank you so much for your continued support. Join the LinkedIn group, drop me an email with any questions. I'll try and gather, there's lots of questions still coming in, so I'll try and gather as many as I can and reply to them. Maybe there might be some for Rachel and Ellen that I can share with you guys as well. So we'll try and get all those questions answered if we can. And stay safe, wash your hands, and we'll see you again very soon. So thank you, everybody.